What's here for each of us? What's the movie? What's the theater that's happening right now? And are the arisings, the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, the parts, do they seem distant? Are they close? How intimate? How intimate are we with what's here? Do we notice, is there resistance to what's here? What do you notice? I would like things to be different. Would like more relief, more okayness. And as you're aware of these parts that would like something to be different, how intimate are we with the resistance that's arising in our system? And not from a doing, not from a part that's like, oh, that's a good idea. Let's be intimate. Let's welcome everything. But just from this presence that you are. How intimate are you with the resistance? And do your parts experience a presence here, a welcoming here? Do they experience like they're being hugged, they're being welcomed, they're being greeted to your home? Is there something that your parts can relax into? Is there something that you can relax into that's here? This intimacy? Is there something that's holding you? Are you really just alone in this, or your parts are alone? Are you alone? Or is there something that's here that you can rest into? Is there an okayness that's here that the parts can find some trust in, can be held by? And lastly, as you feel your somatic field, as you feel your body, perhaps there's some identification as your body. Is that held? Is there something that's holding that? Or is there an okayness that's in it as its very nature, that everything can just relax in this embodiment? What's it like to be in this body here now? What's it like? And are there two answers to that in your system? Is there the, oof, I want my body to be different. I want it to be more comfortable, parts that are having resistance to it? And is there also a delight in being here in this body now? All right, welcome everybody. For some of us, very early morning, and for others of us, it's later in the day, get to explore together today. I'm going to go ahead and close the room for us, 7 of us, to go on this journey and in curiosity, like how is life moving in each of us? This flavor of self in each of us. And what's it going to be like when Elizabeth shares what's here for her, when Eli shares, when Anne shares? What's that going to open in my system? How am I going to get to know this being, this self more intimately through our 6 friends who are with us today? And is there anything that any of us are going to say that Jack, Zoe, Jessica, Sid might say in describing parts that are in our systems that's foreign to you? Is there anything? Are there any parts that we might describe that, oh, I can't find that. Oh, that's just Sid. He's strange. Or do we just, is it, yes. Or is there a familiarity with this all? And as we hear each other speaking of our parts, does that help us find more this shared connectedness in our humanity and also the innocence of our parts? And some people give me a hard time because I keep talking about the innocence of our parts. What's it like when we really do see the innocence of what arises in us? Or if I'm just speaking about my parts, and if you can see the innocence in my parts, the gift that can be as we find them in ourselves. Or then you step out in the world, and whoever the bad person is, the enemy, the person who isn't kind to you, speaks to you, and you hear their parts, and then there's just seeing the innocence that's there. And lastly, most importantly, welcome everything home that's inside of us. How do we welcome them home? It can be difficult, right? When they scare us, when they're contracted, when they say things like, you should, you did it wrong, you really messed up. As we open more to the sweetness of that, the longing of these parts for home, the longing for peace, for okayness, for flow, for connection, as we see their innocence, then it becomes easier for us to be home for our parts and for what remains that hasn't come home yet, to find that home is here. As always, I'd love to go around, and I'm not too big of a group today, so we can just dive in to us and hear what's happening in each of us. How is life moving through you? And it's just the same questions. It's like this self, this beingness that's here now. What's its flavor in you? What's the flavor of being this isness self in you? What's the most prominent quality of it? And there's absolutely never a wrong answer. We're curious to see how it's coming. And if you can't find it, that's really fascinating too. And we'll dive in together into that. It could be as simple as presence, love, flow, tenderness, welcoming, ease, connectedness, care, creativity, play. What's it for you as you listen? And notice as you listen, do you need a part to help you figure this out? Or can you just, as we just listen, as we're just here, and notice what it is? And then what are your two? How is life expressing? How are the parts here? What are the thoughts, feelings, and sensations? Or with Rumi's guest house, This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Welcome and entertain them all. Who are your guests? Who are your two most pronounced, loudest guests in your house? As you listen now, you just listen inside. And while I'm thinking of this, and while you're being with your guest house, while you're being with what is it that's here now inside of me, just in the background, I'm going to do my housekeeping so I get it over with. But if you just kind of stay with what's the beingness that's here? What is the guest house? What is this that welcomes? What's the flavor of it? And what are the parts? Who are the guests that are coming and going? Do they come and go, or do some of them just kind of stay? And while we say that, my housekeeping is just that I'm not a psychotherapist. This is not the IFS of psychotherapy. We're friends and colleagues exploring, can leave at any time. Everybody's good with that and good being responsible for their own journeys today, if I could get a thumbs up. And the second one is that this is being recorded to possibly share with others who couldn't come, probably often through my website or other ways electronically, but only my image will ever be shared. However, the audio of your participation will likely be shared if this is shared electronically. And we don't, unless we need to, we don't go in so much deeply into the stories of the parts. Instead, we try to hear what it is that our parts are longing for. What is it that they're longing for? And so there's never a need to share anything that would have you be uncomfortable. And if you end up doing that, that's fine too. And just stay on with me at the end and let me know, Sid, I'm not so comfortable with that. And I just go delete, delete, delete. If everybody's good that this might be shared electronically, if I could get a thumbs up, please. Great. Great. And so here we are in our guest house or whatever your metaphor is. What's the beingness that's here for you? What's the quality of self that's the loudest? And what are your two most pronounced parts? And we'll go around and we can kind of take our time together because it's a smaller group. And Eli, can we start with you?
Sure. In the beingness quality, I would say is in okayness, like everything's fine right now. Um, a part usually in response to that is one of them is okay, now how do we make sure that that you could stay like that you stay there? Um, and the other part that kind of just recently popped in was like connect, which is also a response to that, is also like a connector wanting to connect, like when things are safe.
For all of us as we hear Eli. Eli describes a sense of okayness that's here. What's that like in your system? Sometimes people call it causeless okayness. Like it's not conditioned on experience. It's not conditioned on what's happening. Just an okayness here. What's your version of that? Is that the right word? Okayness for you? The causeless, the blank after causeless. What's your word? Do you know it as okayness, or is it more like presence or awareness or love or welcoming? What's your word for it? And Eli describes a part when things are good, when there's a sense of the self, this beingness is here and present, like in this okayness that's here for him. A part that's, oh, I like this. I want this to hang around. I want more of this. I want this when I step into my life and things are difficult. I want this okayness. Can we all find our version of a part like that? that wants to maintain the good stuff, wants to maintain the presence, the pervasiveness of self. Can you find that? And where does that, where do you hear that voice? Oh, I like this. I want this. What can I do to have this stay, to have more of this? Where do you hear that voice? Is it like leading in front of you? Is it in the head? Is it in the heart? Where do you locate that voice? Or is it more like a sensation or an image? Can you find it that way? Can you find that voice as an object, that part as an object? And is it a familiar voice in your system? And this is just one of the great gifts of Dick Schwartz's IFS. We get to know these. We get to be aware of them in contrast to aware as them. What does that discernment mean to you? Being aware of them, of this part that wants to hold onto this versus being as it. Oh, I am. I want to hold it. I want to. I need this. It's just a part that wants it. Eli, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you.
Thank you. How's everybody doing? How's everybody doing? Or how are you? How are you? Where do you go to the response to that question? How are you? Because it might go two places. It might go to self. Oh, there's this okayness here that Eli was speaking of. There's okayness. And it might go to, oh, I don't know what I'm going to say, or should I say something a certain way? Should I do it right? Yeah, Anne's like, yeah, I know that part. Like, or Sid's like, oh, where are we going today? How can I be a good facilitator? It's like, isn't it the sweetest thing as we notice our systems to how are you? And whatever parts that are here that are trying to help us. Can we see the innocence of what arises? And before we go to Elizabeth, is there anything bubbling that's wanting to be said? So we can be a little gentler today with our slower. Anything here? Isn't it nice to feel each other, to be in this connectedness, to be in this container? Often we have to rely on our own self to meet our parts. And here today, we've got our own self as primary, the self that owns self, that's so funny, but the self that we know here. But then we also have this community, the six of us who are with you that are in this, that are interested and curious and welcoming. And notice if your parts can feel that, like how much are your parts getting the gifts of that there's Zoe here, there's Anne here, there's Jessica here, Jack's here, Elizabeth's here, Eli's here, Sid's here. You're not alone. There's all this love and welcoming. How much of that are you able to receive? And you notice there's some parts, maybe there's a skeptic part, a protector part, and ones that aren't letting all of that, aren't letting us fully receive that. And can we also honor and appreciate those, the protector parts, like, hey, we need to be safe, we need to be careful. And just to notice over this hour and a half, if something changes with the protector roles, that they become, the protectors becomes, they get some relief, they get, oh, there is more safety here. And they let more of us in as this welcoming of you and your parts. Elizabeth, what's happening?
Hey there.
Hey.
You can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So there's like an angry defender part. It's kind of like a fire-breathing dragon. And hidden underneath is an exile part that tends to stay in shadow and not be seen, that wants to be loved and special. And beingness, I feel courage. The aspects of beingness are courage to talk about these parts, and patience. Patience when working, when these aren't parts to come and be fixed. They're parts for me, for true self to be patient with.
You. What's that like for us as we hear Elizabeth? And for some of us, this is happening on two levels. There's the hearing the words, but then there's the like the resonating feeling, like the connecting. Whatever we experience, if it's hard, if it's compassion, if it's care, if it's just like, gosh, I relate to everything Elizabeth's sharing. It's like being with her, the gift that she just offered us, the gift of beautiful Elizabeth. How much are we able to receive that, resonate with, open to that? As we explore self, we've got, here is self, we have self in Eli and self in Elizabeth. Does it help us know? Does it help us find greater intimacy with this causeless self, this causeless being that's our nature? Elizabeth mentioned two qualities of self. Patience. Patience. How do you know patience as a quality of your nature? Is that the background? Is there just patience here when parts aren't wanting something to be different? Is what's left patience? And courage is such an interesting one, right? Because it's so easy for it to be like parts. I'm feeling courageous. I'm going to do this. Courageous. I'm going courageous as part. But as we find this as self, this courage, how do we find that? How do we find courage as our very nature? How do you find it? As we get to know, as Dick Schwartz will describe this self, this being undiminishable, can't blemish self, this that we are. Do you know that? Do you know that there's something in your system that can't be hurt? What's your flavor of that, or how do you know that? This is how my system finds courage as a quality, as it knows that nothing can be diminished. Then there's no fear from this beingness. There's no fear in this beingness because it can't be diminished. How about Elizabeth's fire-breathing dragon? An anger, a defender part. When we hear her speak of that, do we go, wow, that is so cool? Really? Wouldn't you love to have a defender, a protector part that's a fire-breathing dragon to have your system feel safe? Fire-breathing dragon. What's your version of, what is your strongest protector, defender that might come as righteous anger? Don't you touch me. Don't. That is not okay. That is not acceptable. We are protecting our system. Elizabeth spoke of an exile in her system that's That's longing for love and to feel special in the shadows. Like for our exiles, what is our strongest protector, our loudest protector? For Elizabeth, it's a dragon. Maybe it might not be your strongest, but this fire-breathing dragon. What's it for you? Is it like a knight? What is it in your system that protects your exiles, that protects when needed? And as we hear of Elizabeth's fire-breathing dragon, although she might have a part that's like, the fire-breathing dragon's a problem. This anger is a problem. There might be a part that criticizes it, that says it's a problem. And we probably have that in our own system for our protectors. But can we celebrate the protectors, this fire-breathing dragon in Elizabeth and our version of it in our own system? And can we also welcome the part that says, no, it's a problem. It gets us into trouble sometimes. What's that like for us all? And then lastly, the exile. Elizabeth spoke of this exile that's in the shadows, wants to be loved, wants to be special. What's your version of that? And this is effortless IFS that complements classic IFS. So we don't go to the exile. We just notice. There's just an awareness of it, just to see what's here. So if there's a part trying to help, we just notice that. And then do you notice when you hear Elizabeth speak of her exile that just wants to be loved, wants to be special, and it's in the shadows? How do you resonate with that? What happens in your system? Elizabeth, anything you'd like to add? Thank you. Thank you for your gift, Elizabeth. All right, how's everybody doing? How are you? How are you? And then as we are here now together, as we're here now, what do we find in this here now, in this presence, in this now? As we meet, as we are here, and that there's no problem here. There's no problem in this here now. And I'm just sharing that to give our systems a little break as we move between these journeys, between people, as we just kind of like a return to. It's like I went to a really fancy restaurant once, and in between courses, they literally served you sherbet. They literally like, okay, we're gonna give you some sherbet, give you a little break, and then we're gonna go back to the next course because you don't want to miss any of it, right? You want to like clear, okay, that was the last course, ready for the next course. And that's how I came up with it. Maybe you have a better idea, but the here now, and it's kind of borrowed from Eckhart Tolle, the sense of the now, that there's no problems here. It's like the self, this fullness, this sense of fulfillment, this absence of lack. So we meet back here before we go to Anne. And to also, if there's exhaustion here, if there's a part like, whoa, this is a lot, or well, I need a little break. Before we go to Anne, is there anything coming up? Anything that wants to be shared? All right. Let's go to Anne. Hey, Anne.
Hello. Well, what I was responding to at first to when you said, are the parts distant or how distant are they, or are they close? And my parts were distant, it felt like, when I first closed my eyes when you were doing the intro. And I felt a lot of resistance in my system. And I didn't feel very intimate with that. I was I felt like I was in no man's land, and And I was pushing everything away to try to get some peace, doing the wrong thing by pushing everything away, maybe, but and then who are my guests? There's a scolding part of me that's present right now. And it keeps saying to me, there will be consequences for your decision. And there's another part, a kind of timid part, that's waiting for the judgment from this part or from life, or I don't know what exactly, but it's a timid part. What are the parts longing for? I think ultimately safety and also beauty. And my aspects of beingness. I feel a little bit of fear here. This is a new group to me, and I'm not sure I'm speaking properly. You know, that's a part, I guess, maybe. Yeah, so there's that unsurety and also vulnerability. I was in another group this week, and I made a comment, and the leader spoke about the fact that I appear to be vulnerable, more vulnerable maybe than some of the other people in the group, and that that was hard to hear. I feel like I have to cover up my vulnerability. So I'm saying too much. That's what I have to say, you know.
Wow. Wow. Can everybody like join me in the sense of wow and the appreciation of Anne's system? Notice what the response is inside of you. And is it separate from you? Is anything Anne said foreign to you? Is absolutely anything she said foreign to you? Or can we not find absolutely all of it in our system? And as we find it in our system, can we receive the gift? Can we receive the gift of all these, everything she shared? And I'll go over some of them, but how can we receive that as we become more intimate with our own systems, with our own parts, with the tensions that arise in our systems? The parts being distant in the sense of almost wanting to push them away so that we can find some peace. We all relate to that in our relation to our parts, that we can see them as, gosh, I'm kind of exhausted, and here the parts are again. And that some of us can find them as I can find them as a problem sometimes. And just if I could just push away, and then I could be in this beautiful background that's here. Or maybe I could touch this beauty and safety that Anne's speaking of, that her parts are longing for, if we just get some space. And can we all, I'm going to invite us to see if we all have understanding and compassion for what Anne's describing. Sense of kind of wanting to push them away. Like, I'm not so intimate with my parts right now. And this is kind of a little trick that I play in this game, in inviting you to have empathy with Anne's system, with how she's pushing her parts away. Because if we can really see the innocence and beauty of that, sometimes it's just easier to see it in our friends than in our own system. If we can really see that, then as we do that, it's like, oh, wake up and there's that part again. Gosh, we can see the innocence of that in our own system. It's such a big deal. These parts of us that want to give us relief. And Anne even described the sense of a no man's land. A no man's land, like this isn't a safe place to be. How do we know that in our system? Like sometimes we feel that in our bodies, right? Like, I don't want to be here. This isn't safe. This isn't comfortable. And then we find ways, as you always hear me go, like I go to the Netflix or a microwave pizza, and it kind of gets me from this no man's land, gets me from the discomfort of like really being here and present with what's here. And I love that. I love that I have that option to just kind of get a break. But so we all can find this. How do we know the no man's land in our system, and what's that like? A part, Anne called it a scolding part. Well, Anne, before I go further with the parts, is there anything you'd like to add to?
I wasn't expecting that question. Yeah, I don't have an answer to that right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me just go with the parts that Anne mentioned. It's like a scolding part, a part of me that believes there are going to be some consequences. What's your version of that? Sometimes we have it, especially with our exiles, that are like, I'm going to get in trouble. There are going to be consequences to this. Like my inner critic's going to come out and tell me how I did it wrong, and that's going to hurt. What's your version of that? Like protectors that are like, we're going to be scolded for this. There are going to be ramifications. We need to be careful. And so as we hear that in Anne, do we not just, we just touched by it? Can we just, again, like it shows a timid part, You got to be careful. And then she spoke of speaking properly. It was like just again a protector. That hey, Anne's only been in our group once before, and it's like, wow, I don't know everybody here, and and then after her last experience in a group, it's like, well, is this going to be safe here, or after this group, am I going to have my critic tell me that I did wrong? Am I going to have to go through the scolding and making myself wrong? And just the protectors that are looking out for us. And then the feeling of vulnerability she described. Do we all know this? And then for us, how intimate are we with this? How intimate are we with Anne's system? How familiar is that to us? Like, would you want to, like for me, I just want to walk into her guest house and see all of it. I'm fascinated by it. How intimate are we with hers? And then how intimate are we with our own? With all these resonances that she opened for us. So that was, thank you, Anne, for opening all this for us. Any final words that you'd like to share before we move on to Jessica?
I just want to say that I've seen Jessica put her hand to her heart, and I have a really emotional response to that. So thank you for doing that, Jessica.
And sometimes it can be easier to see in Jessica because she's just whatever it is in Jessica's transparency of this love. And can we see it in all of us? Can our systems receive it in all of us? The care, the welcoming, the curiosity that's here in all of us, perhaps even the celebration of each other's parts. What are we able to let in? And sometimes it's easier. And again, Jessica just wears this love. Easier to feel it. And what's that like for our parts? You receive that. Like, yes, I do relate to everything you're sharing. I do know this in my own system. What's that like? What's it like for our parts to be received that way? To be heard, to be understood, to be loved, to be welcomed. This is a lot. Again, here we are. You go, okay, breath. Woo! Take out the shoulders. Before we go to Jessica. Lot. And then here we are now. Here we are with 6 friends. Here we are in this moment. What's it like to be here? What's it like to be here now? What's this aliveness like, this presence, this vibration? Maybe there's even a sound to it, a hum. This presence is now. What's it like? Connectedness. In a way, we're also playing with knowing our parts. And sometimes we blend with our parts. And then there's this self, this is being, this now, this presence, this love that's here. Just notice in your system, does it go back and forth? And where are we going to go next? What is happening in Jessica? What are we going to find there? How is self? And is it Jessica's self when she describes beingness, or is she describing something that's common to us all as in our curiosity of how beingness is expressing through her? And as she shares how life is moving in parts, is it just her, or is she speaking about parts, these expressions of life that we all know? Jessica, and then it's like to turn on the movie. Okay, here comes the movie. The next attraction, it's Jessica.
That I have a fear of my love not being wanted. So I'm feeling very emotional about it being noticed and accepted, which is not the thing that was happening before. But I noticed this morning that my alarm activated a sense of dread, which is my loudest part, and noticing that might actually be happening every morning. And I have too many other parts in response to that or with that or behind that to pick a second. And my quality of self would be acceptance and welcoming.
Thank you. Acceptance and welcoming. Or for all of us, as we hear Jessica speak of self as acceptance and welcoming. Oh, don't turn it off. Yeah. Acceptance and welcoming. What's most like that's here now for you? And notice that we have parts that can do that too. It's like, especially like sometimes we have therapist parts that I know what I need to do. If I can accept and welcome everything that's really going to be helpful. And I adore those parts. And then there's this kind of this space, this background, the sky, the beingness. to know that as this openness, this acceptance, this welcoming. What's your expression of that? What's your version of that? That acceptance and welcoming is here. Whatever taste you get of that now, I'm going to invite us, we can sink into it. We can sink into this acceptance and welcoming. What happens when we sink in? Does it become more alive? Is there more aliveness in the body, more fullness? When we sink in, does it kind of expand out around us, the space? Sink into acceptance and welcoming. What's that like for you? Does something open up? Or does nothing happen? It's like, wow, acceptance and welcoming. Maybe we can't find that right now. Can we find okayness just with what's here? Whatever's here for us. Jessica described this morning when her alarm went off. She noticed a sense of dread. When you hear that, or when you feel Jessica speak of that, what does that touch in you? What part resonates as that? Maybe a protector part, maybe an exile, a sense of dread. And when we hear Jessica, when we heard Jessica speak of that, what was your response? Sense of dread. And then, is it a problem for us that maybe the alarm goes off or sometime during our day, or however we know this sense of dread, or your version of it, a protectiveness, fear, resistance, a control, however that plays for you, this dread. Is it a problem? Is it a problem? Jessica's like, it sure is a problem, Sid. Then, when we notice it as a problem, what part is saying that? What part is saying, gosh, I'd really rather not, like, gosh, I have to start my day this way? I'd really rather start my day differently. My family, with excitement, with creativity, with love. But can we notice where that comes from? Can we notice the part that has a preference that the dread's not here? And then for all of us, whatever our version of this dread is, what is it wanting? Because really, they're if we can see them, from Dick Schwartz, they're no bad parts. They are all here to care for us, to protect us, for our best interest, doing the best they can for our best interest. And so with your version of dread, what is it that that part wants? What does it long for in you? What is it that's wanted? Does it really want it? Does it want ease? Is it wanting safety? Is it wanting? Is it wanting okayness? Is it wanting what Jessica was describing, this welcoming and acceptance? Is it wanting to be welcomed and accepted just the way it is, the dread? Is it wanting a sense of fulfillment? Is it wanting connection? Is it wanting to be seen? Is it wanting appreciation? What is it that it's longing for in your system? Your version of dread, your version of the protector. And if you can't find that word dread, Like, see if you can find something that's similar, because we all have protectors that do this. What's it longing for? And then the last question with that, what's most like what's being longed for that's here now? Most like what's being longed for that's here now. Is there what Eli was speaking of, this okayness? Is there okayness here if that's what's being longed for? Is there peace here if that's what's being longed for? Is there being heard, being seen, being known? Do you notice that this awareness that's here, it does see, it does know, it does hear. There is hearing, there is seeing. That the part is being seen. Is it for love? The longing for love? Is your part longing for love? Are you longing for love? And what's most like love that's here? Or is it longing for safety? I want everything to be safe. Okay, safe. Are you longing for safety? This is a more subtle one. What's most like safety? Depth of okayness that's here now for each of us. And Jessica also mentioned another part. Maybe it's similar to what Anne was describing when she was in that other group and she was really sharing what was there. And instead of getting a sense of being kind of received and appreciated for her vulnerability, for her openness, receive something different than that. Jessica's part, her vulnerability, that wants to be loved and accepted and seen. How do we know that? Vulnerability, actually often in our exiles, that just want to be seen and loved for just the way they are, accepted for just who they are, okayness with just how they are, who they are, what they are. Do we all know this? Can we all find this part Jessica described? How intimate can we be with that in our own system? And notice we might have a part that comes up that says, no, you shouldn't want that. You should be able to find it all in yourself. It's like, oh, thank you, part. But then there's this longing to be seen, to be heard, to be welcomed. We appreciate that as we want that from others, for safety, for okayness. We find that in our own systems. Jessica, how did I do trying to really be with what you were sharing? What's here for you?
Yeah, you did great. Sid. Thank you.
Isn't it sweet for all of us that we're not alone in this? And just the gift that Jessica's sharing, just in what's here. And there's no right way doing it right. I think what we're just interested in is what's here. It could be when we get to Zoe, it could be like, or you get to Sid, it could be like, oh, I couldn't feel anything. I just had a loud part that was like thinking about my day. I mean, we could have that and like we could be fascinated by that. Wow, it's just what's here. Thank you, Jessica. And of what Jessica shared with us, how much were you able to receive? How deep were you able to go in to receive the gifts of that, to find it in your own systems, become more intimate with this acceptance, this welcoming, and more intimate with the part in us, it's like the dread, and with the part that wants to be accepted and loved. How deeply were you able to go into that in you? All right. Thank you, Jessica. All right. Just a little shake, a little dance. Oh, whoa, that was a lot. That was a lot. It's like, gosh, whew, where are you taking us? What are we doing here? Gosh. Whew. And just notice whatever parts are here, like, God, this is exhausting. This is too much. I need a break. Do I have to go? Do I have to go into this intimacy? And then just here we are again in this now, maybe finding Eli's sense of this okayness that's here, this presence, this now, this love, this moment where nothing is missing, where there's an absence of want. Here we are. And before we go to Jack, please take care of your systems. If there's like, okay, that's enough. Just I'll probably keep inviting us to dive, but you can just ignore me and be like, okay, I'm just gonna hang out in something that's here. You just ignore me. And for any of us, if it's like really enough, you're just let us know and wave goodbye and we'll see you next time. It's just take care of yourself, right? Because this is a lot. It's a lot. Anything that wants to be shared before we go to Jack? Okay. All right. Are you ready for the next feature? It's Jack.
Yeah. Um, I'm seeing I guess I'll pick out this great holder of polarities, this great holder of contradictions that has a sense of wholeness because of that. So because there's parts of me, or there's a part of me that if anyone makes any kind of any positive statement, there's another part of me that will say, well, yeah, but the exact opposite is probably true. You know, I can argue for the exact opposite. So there's parts that are sort of doing that, and this some sort of open, boundless ability to let all that play out. I see it sometimes if it starts to. I have I guess a self-like part that's sort of an advisor. They will like, okay, we can do that. Here's probably what'll happen, because I do sort of I have a sense of everything is cause. So we talked about causelessness, and that takes me down a rabbit hole of, well, then it can't really be a thing, but I wouldn't call it a thing, right? I wouldn't call that self a thing. But what's the parts that are showing up the strongest for me, and it's been sort of subsiding for the whole since we started here, is that all this wonderful, pleasurable endorphins, you know, serotonin stuff floating around through my body. Just felt really, really nice. So just really enjoying that. And then this part that wants to push against everything. Like it doesn't really, people might, I'm afraid about, I trust you guys enough to tell you this, that sometimes it can feel mean. I think sometimes I'm worried that I'll seem mean, right? And that's not where it's coming from, I don't think. Or there's no, it doesn't feel mean, it feels more truthful, but truth can be mean too. But so the idea of acceptance, right? What comes up for me really strongly is a part that says there's absolutely no reason why anybody should ever agree with you or accept certainly what you're saying. There's just no reason for that. And that's a protective part, just, that sort of, what's the right word? Puts a perspective on any kind of desire for that even. So, and then not that it can't happen, and that's wonderful if it does, don't get me wrong, but to not ever see that as a source of happiness, to not ever see anybody else's reaction ever as a source of happiness seems to make me pretty peaceful. So those kind of thoughts and parts are coming up. And then the way that I'm relating to parts often is, okay, you want that. Okay, that's what you want. Okay. I'm just going to imagine how wonderful it would be if that was true. I'll just imagine what it would feel like if we had exactly what you wanted. Right? Just imagine how that would feel. And then sort of oftentimes the desire for it, or I can just let that desire dissolve away because I'm already feeling exactly like it wanted me to feel anyway. Right? Without actually even having whatever it wanted necessarily happen. And I don't know, is that bypassing? It certainly is a way to sort of clarify, is that what you really want? And if it's, yeah, that's exactly how I want to feel, the way you're imagining that. So that sometimes comes up for me. And I don't know if it's nice to do that for me. Yeah, so that's kind of so I guess the holding of the opposites, the part of me that's sort of fading away, that felt lots of really positive endorphins floating around, and this desire, or this drive to, whenever I come up with anything or I hear anything from anybody else, want to see if the opposite's just as true. And the idea that one way to see if what my parts really want is good is just to imagine what it would be like if they had it and see where that goes. So that's kind of what came up for me, listening to everybody and what I came here with. So yeah,
Nice.
I don't know.
Thank
I've
you,
talked too
thank you,
much, but there
Jack.
you go.
So there was a lot there in what Jack just shared. Notice where you went with it. And also, for some of us, it might be a little different language to help to bridge it to Jack. So it's like to really, how intimate can we be with what he shared? Some of the kind of philosophers about talking about self speak of three primary windows to self, to knowing self. And sometimes they call it truth, love, and beauty. And truth can be from clarity and through understanding. And love, love, and then beauty, just seeing and knowing the beauty of what is. Some of what Jack shared might be through the window of truth, through the clarity of understanding and knowing, to seeing, piercing through. As he shares the holding of opposites, we often do this in effortless IFS. There's a sense of stepping back, to be able to be aware of the polarity, because often when we identify, we go back and forth from one side to another, agreeing, disagreeing, yes, no. And in our work, we try to shift back to kind of welcome it all and see it. And what I was hearing in Jack's system was it kind of an awareness of that, and almost he's playing with just going to the opposite and seeing it can be equally true. Perhaps as a way of like this truth, this understanding, a way of piercing through to this. Noticing that might not work for you, or it might be like, wow, that's really cool. I don't do that. Is it useful in your system? And then, so Jack also spoke about the endorphins that were here and the enjoyment of the endorphins. It's like, what part in us enjoys kind of the pleasure endorphins of this life, perhaps of this bliss, of this openness? And then Jack also mentioned that there was a sense of, at the end, that they were kind of fading, the endorphins. And what is it that has kind of the fullness, the love, perhaps the bliss be more full in our system? And what has it fade? Can we notice that? And Dick Schwartz often speaks of indicators of self, of being self-led. And how do things like endorphins or openness or love, how do they help us know where we're coming from in the moment? And it was also interesting where Jack went with being with parts and their longings. And that I often ask you, what's most like that longing that's here now? And that Jack has a different way. Like he can just imagine that that's here. You can kind of find it here through imagination. But perhaps even to imagine it here, does it have to be grounded in that it's accessible? You know, Jack asked, is it a bypass or not? Just to listen to his play, the way his system works with it. Can we be fascinated by it? How close can we get to that? And what gifts does he have for us? And then I guess my question for you, Jack, was you mentioned a part that kind of, you said it pushes against everything. It kind of pushes or finds the opposite, pushes. Anything else you'd like to say about that? Like I was intrigued by that part you mentioned.
I guess what comes to mind is, in some ways, the part that enjoys doing that sort of popped up when I realized I could have an argument for either side and win it in a debate. Win one side in the debate one day and win the other side in the debate the other day. Right? There was a sort of a pleasure, so that it didn't really make any difference what was true. That's not what you were trying to find. You're trying to find to win the debate and convince other people, right?
Mm.
So it's sort of like let that go, or transcended that desire to win the debate, and let it go towards seeing if holding both sides can bring me closer to that holding of polarities, or maybe truth. That's as good a word as any.
Beautiful.
So
Beautiful.
that part helps me do that. So as opposed to
Nice.
being a part that wants to argue, it's a
Mhm.
part and wants to win. It's a part that wants to help
Gorgeous.
that. Yeah.
So how about that for all of us? Because we talk about unblending, not being identified with a part, and we can see this is one of Jack's ways, a part that has, oh, I have the answer, I have a way. And he can just like see the opposite and see like the opposite is just as true. And you can see the innocence of the parts. And we're not going to some kind of relativity game, like everything's equal. It's more like we're seeing the innocence of all the parts for what they're arguing for. And then perhaps, like he says, it can help him find the truth of what everything is of. Thank you, Jack. Okay, so here we are again. I don't let it all shake out because we have Zoe, and we have no idea where Zoe's got for us, what gifts she has for us. So we just get to let it shake it out. And maybe there's some exhaustion. Like there's a lot to follow. Jack offered so much there, and how his system makes sense of this, how it finds this beingness, this okayness, perhaps this truth, this understanding that they speak of. Just notice how you're doing, what parts are here for you now. There's some exhaustion. And is there acceptance and welcoming for what's here? Is there acceptance and welcoming of what's here in you? And back to the now. Here we are. Here we are in this play, in this almost like adult playtime, getting to be here with our friends and getting to explore and celebrate our inner systems and celebrate each other. Like, could it really be like being out on the playground? Out on the playground, and we're gonna, like, Zoe has a little castle on the playground, and we're gonna enter her castle with her, and she's gonna be our guide. What you got, Zoe?
Hi Sid, hi everyone. Yeah, I am feeling some tiredness now. The quality of being that's most here for me is also welcoming acceptance, and that's really present with me today, as this morning I became very aware of a part that I don't think I've seen very clearly before. And it's an I know best part. I know best, superior part of me, and then there's been a very reflective part around this morning that's just kind of reflecting on all that and watching and looking and seeing and asking. And I see that that I know best part is really strongly aligned with like a strong therapist part that's kind of always or often finding safety through kind of analyzing everything around me. And then I noticed that it's also really aligned to a part that can be very, very judgmental, and is, can be passing judgments on what other people are saying or thinking, or what I think they should do, because I know best. Yeah, so this morning I've just been watching those parts, becoming familiar with them, seeing them, and then as I've been sitting and listening, I'm aware as well of those parts that there are parts of my system that really don't like those three parts, and they hold the kind of sadness that this superiority part, it longs for connection. That's actually what it longs for. It's kind of queenly. It's kind of sits on a throne, kind of remote. And yet what it really wants is to connect to people. And yet other parts notice, well, the more I know best is in control of this system, actually, the less connection we get. So then there's kind of, a part that holds the sadness of that all these years and years and years of not clearly seeing this part in my system, and and how, yeah, it's longed for something and yet hasn't known the right way to go about getting it, because it just knows, you know, yeah, I kind of know best. And so I'm kind of aware of the tensions between those two places. And then, you know, bringing it right into the now. You know, today, I really heard those words. You know, how are you able to receive the gifts of all of the people here? And so it's been, it's felt significant. It's felt more opening to to receive more of everybody today, and to receive the gifts of everyone else in a way of finding that in myself. And I noticed that although there's a part of me that is like really frustrated that I have to wait till last, that actually at the same time, okay, this is like, there's a gift here, because I'm receiving, and that's probably not my normal default position in my system. Yeah.
Wow, I am so glad we left Zoe for last. So much here. Wow. But can we all, as we hear Zoe speak of the I know best part that kind of sits on the throne, as we hear that, what's our version of it? Our version of the I know best. I know the answer to this. I know how it should be. I know what's right or what's better. Really find that part. Can we like really see it? Like I love Zoe's image of it's like this queenly part that sits on a throne. Can we really, really see that part in us? And then, what is it that that part is longing for in us? What inspires it? What motivates it to be such a strong part in us? I know. Like this is where Jack kind of plays his game with the opposites and finding opposites. Like what is it? What is it? What is it that motivates it? What is it that this part really wants? This queenly one, the I know best. Or what is it protecting? What is this I know best protecting? And there's a vulnerability. There's something about the firm ground of I know best. Like I have a compass. I know what direction is north. I know this. And how that can give some peace to the system, some reassurance, some safety. It can be held by this part. I know best. But what is it for you? What motivates this I know best? What's it serving? What's it supporting? What's it protecting? Because we've heard like Zoe, that she had like a sad part that came in to see like the cost of it. There's a cost, you know, there's a cost that she was describing of having a part like this. But then I'm wanting to celebrate the queenliness of it. I love that she said queenliness, because it's like there's a nobleness to this part and how it's serving us. We find that. Zoe, what do you find? How is it serving life? How is it serving your system?
It's creating a I know the images of a train, and you know, in London where you have Mind the Gap, it keeps a gap between my train, which is off that way, and everybody else. Because I don't have to, there's a gap there. I'm not having to let everyone else in so much.
By having that gap there, how does that serve your system? How does it create more safety, okayness, or reassurance for parts? What do you get from that gap in a very positive way?
It enables me to be very high achieving. And I guess it also, on reflection, allows me a lot of insight. Insight into myself and into what's happening around me.
For all of us, how does the gap, how does the space, how does the gift of this part in us, the one that knows best, and that, oh, I understand, I can see this, I have it, how does it serve us? What does we support for it? How does it support the vulnerability inside of us? And then this is going subtle. Can we see how it's needed in our system? Can we see how that part is needed? It's almost like a spectrum. This seems to be what happens when we have protective parts like that. They're needed, and then as the parts end up finding more and more safety, as the system updates, and there's more safety here, and it's like for some of us, we want a really big gap. It's like, whoa, I need a big gap. Like we've had parts that have had some really difficult situations in life, and we want them to be safe, right? We want a really big gap here. And then in time, this protected part, we can just notice it happens organically. It can have less and less gap because there's a cost to the gap, right? Like Zoe was describing in the connection. But the last thing we want to do is kind of push it and say, no, we don't need that gap anymore. Come on, let's open up to everybody in the world. Hey. No, that just all happens organically when the system's ready for it. And that's why I just wanted to see if we all can celebrate those parts of us that keep the gap there, that keep the space, that keep the protection. And we can also see how, and we can notice in ourselves over time, when we look back over the last couple of years, how things have changed, how maybe there's been more safety here, or maybe there's been another trauma that's happened and we've needed more gap. How you doing, Zoe?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Drawing attention to the fact that the line of mind the gap actually is always shifting. Yeah, it's not just set there, that actually it's shifted in my life and does shift according to where I am, who I am, and how safe I feel. Yeah.
Listen, beautiful. And to watch for all of us right now, maybe to even notice how that's changed in the last hour and 20 minutes as we're together, like our protectors, how they've been able to relax some, and how that changes in circumstances. Like if you walked into a room of people with the exact opposite political perspectives of you, how like, whoa, I've got my protective systems, need to really have a gap here. Notice that. Right. Anything else you'd like to share, Zoe?
here. There's something around also other people's gaps and how that the other side of what you've just said is that that part has actually pushed past other people's line of gaps and trespassed in other people's systems.
Yeah.
And that acknowledging that other side of that is actually there as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Build that for us. Can we find that as we become more intimate with our own gap, with our own protection, with that which keeps our system safe, that it opens up more appreciation and more love of how others are doing the same thing. Their protective system that might be like anger and get the hell away from me, or I don't like you. It might have words that are hard to hear. But could those not be just their dragons, that are their precious dragons that are there to protect their vulnerability? So just that's part of this game that we're playing today, as we're celebrating each other's systems. We're able to see and celebrate Elizabeth's dragons and Zoe's gap. We can really celebrate it if we can really be intimate and see that, and then we can find it in our own system, this protectiveness. It's a really beautiful thing as it opens that up in real life for us when we experience people that their dragons are just, where the hell did that come from? We're feeling like we're being attacked by a dragon, but we were just being touched by it. Oh my God, what sweetness. I'm so happy that you have that protection, the way you're caring for yourself. So as we move towards closure together, how are we doing? There's another 5 minutes. Is there anything that's bubbling that wants to be shared? Any difficulties, any concerns? Yeah, Anne.
I just wanted to say that, because of the way you lead this group, Sid, I was more able to receive and absorb what other people were saying, partly because, everybody was talking uniquely about themselves and their inner system. And partly because I felt safe, like I felt like, I said what came to me, but there are things I could have said, and it's all okay. I don't know if it's making any sense, but that was there are times when I'm in a group and different people speak and I feel intimidated by their experience or whatever. And this time I recognized that there were people with very vastly different experience than I have had, and it didn't intimidate me. So I just want to thank you. This is like, you're really gifted at this. And this is a great group. Yeah.
Man, such a treat having you here. I hope you'll come back a lot. There's very much kind of a subtext that's happening here, and just the safety and the celebration of each other's systems, of each other. And it just seems to be the most effective way I know of opening to seeing the beauty in everything that arises within ourselves. Ultimately, the innocence and beauty of what is, and seeing the perfection of what is, and loving what is. It's just as we celebrate together what's here. Anything else bubbling in these last few minutes?
I have a sort of a polarity that's bubbling up, and it's you oftentimes talk about seeing the innocence of the parts, and the polarity there for me is in a sense, accepting the guilt of the parts. Some parts know they're guilty of what they're doing and they don't care.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So
Yes.
it's like both sides of that. It's like
Yes.
accepting if they're innocent and accepting if they're guilty both ways. But and that's actually seeing that their guilt is innocent in a way. You know, I mean, it goes both ways. But yeah, that makes it more. That just I don't know. It makes me easier to accept innocence if I'm already willing to accept if they come to me feeling guilty. You know, so
Absolutely.
whoever me is, I'm not sure. But thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jack. And that's so included. These words that I'm using them in a way that there are no opposites to them. And so that they're including the absolute, the guilt, the shame, the whatever is here, it's all included. Thank you, Jack. Anything else? In closure, hope you have felt Jessica's word appreciated and welcome today, and Anne's. Hope you have experienced that. Hope your parts have felt that, the gift of that. And I'm starting to say this a lot more, just as you've received the gifts from the 6 of us with you today, to know that that's our experience of you in receiving the gifts of you and your parts and just what you've shared. And thank you for your gifts today. This has been such a sweet hour and a half. And come back again soon, everybody. Bye.